Hi there, my name's Eddie, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Wolfsbane Witch. And today I'm going to be giving you an altar tour of my seasonal springtime altar. This is a space where I do a lot of my manifestation and spell work, so this is an altar where magic gets done. So I just wanted to show you what's going on here, explain a little bit of the things that I have on it, and just show you it because I think it looks cool. So let's get into it. Alright, so let's get into it. This is my springtime altar. Now, I'm gonna go through this altar from the back to the front, and I'm gonna kind of like snake around in sort of a U shape. So, before I do that, I just want to let you know that this altar changes often. So, I have it right now seasonally decorated, but it is not always set up like this. Right now I have a lot of transformation, growth, solar, earth energy going on, but that's because it's springtime, you know? I like to spruce it up a bit. So we're gonna start here in the back left corner with this little slab. This is actually a card holder for my oracle and tarot cards, so that way if I want to have them up so I can see them on my altar, I'll put them there. And then behind that I have a purple inch plant and a prayer plant that are both being propagated. Next to my prayer plant, I have this piece of golden calcite. Golden calcite is a little bit different from yellow and orange calcite, although it is often mistaken as one of the two. I see it and work with it kind of the way you would work with something like Carnelian or possibly golden healer quartz. It has this very healing, energetic, creative, joyful energy to it, and also this sort of solar fire energy as well. Next to that, I have this jar of mugwort. Now, I love working with mugwort. Sometimes I will smoke it, but oftentimes I will just use it in my workings and not ingest it or use it internally in any way. I associate mugwort with magic, with psychic work or spirit work. I also associate it heavily with the Fae, and also lunar energy. And I have this clip slowed down here so I can have some time to speak. I'm actually recording the audio of this a few days after I've recorded this, so I'm sorry that this happens to be in such slow motion, but you can see inside of this mugwort jar, I also have this little glass marble, this white glass marble, and I use that to represent the moon. Because like I said, I do also associate mugwort with lunar energy for that sort of psychic, intuitive, spiritual sense that it has. That sort of magical quality feels very lunar to me. So I have this in there to kind of charge it or imbue it with the energy of the moon, and I will often cleanse this marble in moon water and other lunar energy type cleansing things. Moving on from that, in the center here is this beautiful piece of raw blue agate. Now, I don't even remember where I got this. I think a friend a long time ago, before I was even witchy, and I always just loved the calming, soothing, natural vibe that it gives off. As you can see, the front part of it is cut and polished, but the bottom and the back of it is a little bit more raw, and I really like the look of that. It almost looks like this like perfect mirror being cut out of just a normal everyday stone. And speaking of mirror, you can see how reflective it is. So sometimes, especially before I had a scrying mirror, I would actually light candles and scry into this agate. So it has a lot of sentimental, magical value for me as well. Now behind that, I have this little crystal ball that's actually made out of blue glass. Now this is just my personal association with blue glass, but for me, I associate blue glass with protection, especially like spiritual protection, protection against psychic attacks, or protection against malevolent spirits or trickster spirits that you don't want around or anything like that. You can kind of see in it these bubbles as well, which look really great in candlelight. And I also have used this to scry into as well. Now behind where I had that agate, you can see these two sticks. One of them is from a pine tree that is behind my apartment complex, and the other is actually the stem from a rose flower. And I use both of those as wands interchangeably if I feel like it. Now next we have this vessel that is a handmade piece that I got in the college town that I, well, went to college in. And sometimes I will have liquid offerings in it, but right now I have some rose petals, some chamomile, and some lavender. And I have it just out in the open so I can get that floral scent. And then next to it I have this piece of red agate. And I use this to represent the sun itself. Red agate has a lot of very powerful associations with protection, with abundance, with good luck, with creativity, with grounding, with a lot of things that are associated with the sun. So I like to use this to associate with the sun, and of course the springtime is a great time to work with that solar energy because things are coming back to life, things are warming up, and so you have that sun giving its fertility to the earth, and the earth blooming from that. Moving on from this agate, I have another purple inch plant. These inch plants actually flowered like the day after I filmed this, so I'm sorry that I couldn't get it, but I have it in this bottle that I found when I was a kid. When I was growing up, I had railroad tracks behind my house that were very old, and this is a Thomas Edison battery oil bottle that was washed up when we had a flood. And this was made when they first made the railroad tracks. They used to put battery oil to help them install the tracks. Now inside of this, I have some black tourmaline and raw calcite. Now calcite will dissolve in water, so be careful. I am purposefully letting it do this because I'm kind of experimenting with how the calcium carbonate helps the plants, and as you can see, this inch plant has rooted overnight, very long roots. And in the other one that I planted at the same time, that I propagated at the same time, it has no roots growing yet, which I find interesting. So perhaps my theory of the calcium carbonate in the water actually does help the plant growth, but I'm not sure. I'm still experimenting. I also have these crystals in water to help amplify their energy. I often use crystals in water for that reason, because I believe that the water amplifies the energy of the crystal and kind of spreads it throughout the room. Almost like an oil diffuser, in a way, but like for crystals. Anyway, next to that I have this selenite cube on top of this quartz slab, and I just use this. Again, both of these are very amplifying, very cleansing crystals, so I have the selenite on top of the slab to amplify the selenite's properties of cleansing and clearing my space, so that way I don't have to as often. Next to the selenite, I have my cast iron mini cauldron that was given to me by a dear friend of mine. And on the inside of this cauldron, I just have some pine, some rose petals, some Himalayan salt, and a couple other sort of springtime things that I wanted to kind of have their energy permeating throughout my space, which is why the lid of the cauldron is open to allow that energy to, I guess, rise out of it. Now you can see next to my cauldron here, I have my staff just kind of leaning against the wall. It's always here, so it's not here just because of my altar, and look, you can see where I sit on the floor and record my videos. But yeah, if you want me to make a video specifically about this staff, I would be glad to do so, just let me know. But yeah, I just kind of have it here, so it's always around where I'm doing my magic. But it's not necessarily part of this altar either, but I figured I might as well just talk about it. So let's move on to the bottom right corner. So here, inside of the lid of my mini cauldron, I have titanium aura quartz. Now, a lot of witches have some controversial feelings about aura quartz in general because it is not natural. It is often put on top of natural quartz or smoky quartz, but the colors are man-made. Personally, I would not have picked this crystal out myself, but it was given to me by my significant other as a gift. And honestly, like, I think it's one of the most powerful crystals I own. Every single time I pick up this crystal, it is like an electric zap of manifestation energy just flows right through my body. I feel instantly connected and aligned and magical and just ready to just go and do whatever I've been procrastinating on, or go and do whatever magic that I have been needing to do. So if I were to recommend any man-made crystal, titanium aura quartz is my go-to. Now next I have this spell candle that I have set up. I haven't burned it yet. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'll show you what's going on here. It's actually on an incense burner that sometimes I will melt the bottom of a candle to and use it as a candle holder for my spells as well. On the bottom I have a blue glass bead, another blue glass bead that looks like a evil eye, and then some chamomile, some yarrow, some mugwort, and some lavender are sprinkled around the base of this candle. And then the candle is actually sitting on top of a scented candle that just looked really witchy, so I picked it up. It is tobacco and frankincense scented, and I think it smells really good. Here's just another close-up at some of the herbs that I have on there. I think it looks kind of neat. Behind it I have this, which is a sachet bag of crystals that I associate with the Fae. Wrapped around it I have this pendulum that is fossilized sand and seashells. It's a hagstone that my mom found on the beach, and when she gave it to me I just stuck a string through it and I've been using it as a pendulum ever since. And of course hagstones are highly associated with the Fae, so, you know, tying this around the outside of my Fae sachet bag just made sense to me. I like the way it looks, even though some people have told me it looks like a potato on a string. But moving on to these crystals. So here are the crystals that I had picked to put in this bag. I've kind of been intuitively drawn to pick these ones, so I didn't pick them because I like saw them and thought of the Fae. It was more like, over time, this is just kind of what got into the bag. So starting off with this crystal, this is a tumbled piece of Larvikite. Now I really like using Larvikite for protection magic. It's not as intense as obsidian, and it's also not as like, I guess, strict as black tourmaline. It almost works kind of the way a mirror would. So it's really good for mirror magic if you don't have a mirror, or it's good for that sort of reflective protection type magic, which I associate with the Fae, because typically the Fae that at least I work with or that I'm making this bag for, they are protective and they do have this sort of defensive quality about them, but it isn't necessarily a dark quality the way that obsidian or black tourmaline would be, which is why I chose to use Larvikite. I also love the very like metallic flashes inside the Larvikite. It has a very light feeling about it, but it still is very strong and, like I said, protective. Now next I have this piece. This is another kind of man-made stone. So this is called a Sear Stone, and you'll see in a second when I turn it around, one part is polished while the rest is kind of like frosted over, and so you can see inside of the stone. And you can supposedly use this for scrying or for finding fairies or whatever. I have it just because it looks like a really cool like crystal cave, and I feel like a fairy would love to live in this thing. I mean, heck, I'm a human being and I want to live in this thing. It just looks like a window into like this really cool like crystalline room. I thought that was really cool. And you know, I do have the clear quartz there to also amplify the other crystals. Next up, I have this piece of tree agate. I don't really buy crystals anymore, so I think this is the only piece of tree agate I have. I wish I got more back when I did buy crystals, but you know, I'm happy with this piece. I don't really need a lot of it anyway. It's very powerful on its own. And I put it there for the sort of nature connection, the balance, the harmony aspect of it. And again, I did pick these intuitively, so it's kind of in hindsight that I realized what I picked these for. And oftentimes you might find that that happens with your magic as well. So here I have this piece of Carnelian. It has this sort of fiery, charismatic energy to it. It also is kind of playful. It's got that fertility aspect that I was talking about with the golden calcite as well. And it has that solar energy as well because of its fiery nature, which I associate with sort of the attitude or the courageous boldness of the Fae. And along those lines, I also have this piece of yellow aventurine, which has many of the same properties as green aventurine, but it also has this sense of like playfulness, almost like childlike playfulness, innocence, joy, happiness. This kind of sunshiny springtime feeling, which goes great with the altar I have, and also just great with the energy of the Fae, especially during this season. Next, we have this big old piece of Penite. It has black tourmaline inclusions, so it does have that protective energy similar to the Larvikite, but it is, you know, because they are just inclusions, they're not as intense as a straight up piece of black tourmaline. And of course the Penite is great for psychic abilities, for dreams, for spirit communication, for scrying. People used to make crystal balls out of Penite and scry into them. I've never scryed into the Penite, but I do associate it with the Fae and with spiritual communication, specifically with spirits that are of the earth. And last but not least, I have this little teeny tiny piece of clear quartz. Now you might be wondering why I have two pieces of clear quartz in this. This is a very special crystal. This was actually given to me by the Fae. And I know that there's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions on accepting gifts from the Fae. I might make a whole different video on that, but basically what happened was I was working with the Fae very heavily one year, and I was sitting doing a meditation, and I just opened my eyes from doing this meditation where I'm sitting on the floor in the middle of the room. There's no shelves or anything around me, and just almost out of the middle of the room, as if someone dropped it, but there was no someone there. So it didn't fall from the ceiling, it fell from like halfway down from the ceiling onto the floor right in front of me. And I picked it up, and it's this little piece of clear quartz in this sort of like four-pointed star shape. And this shape is fairly significant to me when it comes to working with the Fae. So I saw this as a good sign that they were accepting of my gifts, that they wanted to work with me, and that they wanted to give me something. So I accepted this gift. And no, nothing bad happened to me because I accepted this gift from the Fae. You need to be mindful when you accept gifts from the Fae. So I wouldn't take anything and everything, but this was a sort of special circumstance, and also like a really weird circumstance that I couldn't chalk up to anything other than the Fae, because I can't explain how this crystal that I never owned somehow fell out of nowhere as if it materialized in front of me, but it did. So yeah. This is a very special crystal. It's probably one of the most special crystals I own, and it's also probably the smallest crystal I own. Now, before I continue on to the rest of my altar, I just want to point out that similar to how I collected these crystals together to represent the fae that I work with, and how I did that intuitively and how things just kind of came together over time, that's kind of how I do my altar setups as well, and also how I collect together ingredients for spells most of the time. Of course, I do know the official correspondences of the ingredients that I work with and of the crystals that I use. I do a lot of research into that, and I do care about that, but that is not the only piece of the puzzle that creates how I come up with these things. I also use my intuition much of the time, as well as my emotional state, the energy of these things collected together. Does it feel right? Do I feel like it is missing something? And also my experience with that object, because my personal experience may or may not align to the official correspondence of that item. But personally, for me, my personal experience with something will kind of overshadow that a little bit. So that's kind of how I set up my altar. So it's not like I wrote down a list of like all the stuff that I have that fits the spring theme and then I collected it all together and put it here. It was more like this is just what ended up here, and now I'm kind of coming to understand why that might be, why my subconscious may have driven me to put these things here based on what I know about them. Now let's move on to my big ol' amethyst chunker with a huge inclusion of white calcite. Now, I know some people won't buy crystals like this, especially with large inclusions of seemingly useless crystals or not as pretty crystals, but I don't buy my crystals for their monetary value. I buy them for their magical value, and to me this is an intensely magical crystal. So I love having it on my working altar. I think it fuels my spells, and it makes them more powerful. Next to that I have this bouquet of different feathers that I have collected over time. These peacock feathers are actually from a peacock that was owned by a friend of mine, like a childhood friend of mine a long time ago. He was a very loud, very aggressive peacock. You don't know how loud and how fast a peacock is until it's chasing you on a four-wheeler screeching. But yeah, so those are some peacock feathers. I use them for protection and good luck. And then now let's move on to the center part of my altar. So here's where I do some spells and some other things. I think I'm gonna start off on the right side of this altar, so where this spell jar is that you see in the corner. So this is not a typical spell jar. This is kind of like a mini deity altar slash statue type thing. This is for the god Pan. Inside of it I have some dried marijuana, I have some purple flowers, I have some wild grapes, some roses, some yarrow, some blue apatite, rose quartz, all that fun stuff that I happen to associate with him. And then behind it I have this tumbled piece of hematite, which is associated with iron and blood, which to me makes sense for the springtime season when you think about all the new life being made, the sort of new bloodlines being born. Then behind it I have this propagated spider plant with just some decorative green beads that I put around the jar. Next to my homie Gerard here, I have this, I think I got this at a Renaissance fair. It's just some like prosperity related crystals in a jar. Put this next to my gnome because I associate gnomes with wealth and abundance. Behind it I have this garden quartz or laudolite point. For me, laudolite is probably the most clearing and cleansing crystal out there, even more so than selenite, but that's just for me, so I have it closer to the center of my altar. In the middle here, I have Gerard, my home protector slash abundance gnome, and at his feet I have my favorite Witch's Rune rune. So this is a rune from a Witch's Rune set, but this is my favorite, and it is the Star rune. So I have that right in the center of my altar, right at the feet of my guardian gnome. Now let's go on to this side of Gerard. Now here I have this little frog that my mom got me when I graduated. I use it to represent transformation, growth, and kind of what you would associate with a frog. Next to that I have this little jar of my cat's fur. I use it, of course, I put it next to Gerard so he can help protect my cat, but I also have it here to have that sort of cat energy on my altar because I think cats are very magical animals. Behind it I have this piece of raw red carnelian. A lot of carnelian on this altar. I don't really own, I think these are the only pieces that I own of it, but I decided to put it there. And then in front of this propagated plant, I have this raw piece of malachite. And no, I'm not going to be touching it with my bare hands. So you can just look at it from afar. Inside this jar, I have yet another spider plant, and then this much bigger pothos plant, which you can actually see is growing a new leaf. Now, I think from here, I'm gonna show you the bottom part of the middle of my altar, and then I'll show you the final side of it on the left side. So at the bottom here, at the very bottom center part of my altar, I have my wand. Now this is one of many wands that I own. This is probably the only wand I own that I did not make myself. It was handmade by someone on Etsy. I'll leave the link to them in the description if I can find them. I did put these beads around it, which are the same beads that I had around that spider plant on my main altar. The bottom of this wand is made out of black palm wood, and the top of it is made out of a shedded deer antler. So this was completely ethically sourced. No deer was killed in the making of this wand. Now in this open part of the bottom, I have a little book that I use to write sigils in and little notes. Sometimes I'll dry leaves or flowers in it. On the top I have this piece of Palo Santo that I probably will never burn. I got it from one of my friends, and I don't have any interest in using it, so I'm not going to. But I didn't want to throw it away because I felt like that was disrespectful. I also had that bag of lavender that you just saw, a magical sachet, and some opium-scented perfume oil that I will put on certain points of my body when I'm getting into a ritual headspace. Inside of this drawer, I just have some sort of like witchy stationery things. I have my magical ink, I have some stuff to melt wax for wax seals, and of course I do have a couple of my wax seals in this. Now, I can't fit too much in this. This is actually a jewelry box that I kind of converted into a little mini witchy altar. So there's only so much room inside of this thing for whatever I need, but I think I made pretty good use of the space. Now inside of this drawer, this is actually the ring compartment of the jewelry box, so I keep some of my magical jewelry in here. I also have a ring that was my grandmother's wedding ring that I inherited after she passed away. in the back here. And also just some like tips to different ink pens I have in the back as well. So I just keep those there to store them and keep them safe. And also to kind of charge them with the magic that I'm doing on top of that altar. So they're always charged. And then finally on this last side underneath my prayer plant, I have this big piece of Himalayan salt and this blue ocean scented candle. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That is my current working altar, my current springtime altar. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much for doing so. If you want to subscribe but haven't, definitely do so. I post videos fairly regularly. And take care. I'll see you in the next one.